success is the accumulation of material possessions or the attainment of a position of power or prestige or something of that sort. I think those are worthy accomplishments and very well may be indicative of success, but not necessarily so in my opinion. So I wanted to work on something else. And in 1934, I coined my own definition of success. I choose to define success as peace of mind, which can be attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you're capable. That's success. Our capabilities are not the same, but we should all be able to make the same effort, the best effort to our abilities under the conditions that exist for us. We should make the effort to try to improve those conditions. We may not be able to improve to the extent that others, but that's worrying about things over which we have no control. I rather think my idea of success came from my father. I know he tried to get across to myself and my brothers. We were raised on a small farm in southern Indiana before we lost it in the Depression. And Dad, I didn't appreciate it at the time, didn't understand at the time, but something did sink in because I remembered it sometime later. I got the idea, not so many words. But his idea was never trying to be better than someone else, but never cease to try to be the very best that you can be. That's something's under your control. The other person's ability isn't under your control, but yours should be under your control. And I think perhaps I got it from him. He believed in that, and I know in his way he was trying to get it across to you, and I think perhaps it did sink in, and by realizing it, it came out when I tried to coin my own definition of success. But after a while, I'm not satisfied. Something's lacking. I studied a while, tried to analyze it, and I finally decided that this was only a definition, something rather abject, something you can't see. And I believe that things we see are a little more meaningful, perhaps, than things about which we only hear. So I wanted to come up with something you could see. And in the hidden recesses of the mind, something popped out that I too had seen many years before, called a ladder of achievement. Someone had taken a ladder with 5 rungs in the ladder, and they'd named each rung some personal trait or characteristic that this particular individual felt was necessary if you wanted to get to the top of the ladder. And I know we all want to get to the top of the ladder, even though we might disagree on what the top of the ladder is. So I couldn't use a ladder, obviously, but from that I got the idea of a pyramid. And I started working on this in 1934 and completed it in 1948 when I was at Indiana State University just prior to coming to UCLA. I placed success, according to my definition, at the apex. I started working from the bottom up. The foundation must be strong. If any structure is to have real strength and solidity, of course it must have a strong foundation. And the cornerstones anchor the foundation. And in 1934, I selected the 2 blocks that are the cornerstones that I never changed. I had many different ideas as the years passed by, and I gave it more and more thought, but never did I change the cornerstones. I dropped some ideas, I replaced them with others. I'd probably change it if some things, if I started over again, but not the cornerstones. I changed the position within the structure, I put different ideas in, until I came as it is now, and I haven't changed it since 1948. One cornerstone is industriousness, and the other one is enthusiasm. You have to work hard, you have to enjoy what you're doing, you have to be enthusiastic about it. Industriousness, there is no substitute for work. Too many people look for the shortcut, they look for the easy way, they look for the trick to accomplish things, and you may get by with such methods for a while, but they're not lasting, and you'll not be developing the strengths that you have by doing that. Grantland Rice, I consider to be the greatest sports writer of all time. He wrote many things in verse to illustrate points. And he wrote something called How to Be a Champion, and said, you wonder how they do it, and you look to see the knack. You watch the foot in action, or the shoulder, or the back. But when you spot the answer, where the higher glamours lurk, you'll find in moving higher up the laurel-covered spire that the most of it is practice, the rest of it is work. There's another verse or two that say essentially the same thing. There is no substitute for work. The other cornerstone is enthusiasm. You have to like what you do. You have to love what you're doing. If you're going to make the most of what you have, you may be tremendously talented, but if you don't really enjoy it, you're not going to become as good and as accomplished as you're capable of. You'll never reach your own particular level of competency unless you're enthusiastic about what you're doing. This is a people-oriented world. We're working with people in every area in one way or another, not just in the home or in the community, but in every way. We are in one way or another. And if we want to stimulate those with whom we're associated, we must be enthusiastic. Otherwise, it just will not make the most of our abilities. I think of my first year at UCLA. When I think of enthusiasm, I attended a meeting one evening to hear a gentleman speak on a topic in which I had absolutely no interest. You might say, why'd you go? My first year at UCLA, we had one of these championships or anything, and someone under whose supervision I was indicated it'd be nice if I was there. Didn't say it had to be, but I got the point. And I was there, sat close to the front, hoped they'd note my presence. I wanted to get established in the first year and everything, and I'd already seen the basketball candidates, and I knew it was kind of sorry. So I better establish myself in other ways because I don't think this material's going to do it. But before long, my attitude had changed, and I found myself listening intently to everything he had to say, and was sorry when he brought his remarks to a close. Primarily, I feel for two reasons. He knew his subject, he knew what he's talking about, and that kind of helped. But he also was enthusiastic, and he was not enthusiastic in a loud or bombastic sort of way, but it radiated in his countenance. There was a sparkle in his eye. He loved his subject, and he knew it. A few days later, I'd been over the UCLA administration building, and upon my return to my office, I came by Powell Library, and with no intention whatsoever, honestly, of going into the library, I did go into the library, and just sort of found myself browsing around in the stack, seeking additional information in regard to a topic about which only a few days before I'd had absolutely no interest at all, none at all. A topic that has given me a lot of satisfaction in the last 40 years. And without the enthusiasm of this one particular individual, that wouldn't have happened, I'm sure. Enthusiasm brushes off on those with whom you come in contact. Between the cornerstones of the structure, forming the foundation, I have 3 blocks that I think are strong. I consider them strong because each block includes others. And when we include others, we're adding strength. Friendship, loyalty, and cooperation. Friendship you must work at. Too often we don't work at it. We take it for granted. We think it's friendship when someone's doing nice things for us. It's nice. It's a nice person, but that isn't friendship. It's friendship when you do for each other. You have to work at it just as you must work at marriage. If a marriage is going to be successful, it's a question of giving. And both sides, otherwise it will not be successful. So, we must have friends. I was speaking in San Francisco a few years ago at an IBM convention, and following my remarks, a gentleman came up to me and he said, Johnny, this was a classmate of mine, I should say, from Purdue. They always lived in Indianapolis all his life, and he came up to me afterwards and said, Johnny, people in California certainly aren't as friendly as they are back home, aren't they? And I said, well, what do you mean, Bob? He said, coming over this morning, met a lot of people, not a single person spoke to. He said, it never happened back in Indianapolis. I said, you speak to any of them? He said, I didn't know any. Well, there's a pretty good point there. I think if we wait for the other person to speak, certainly no one is going to speak. You must work at friendship. I never take it for granted. Loyalty. Loyalty. How can you make the most of the abilities you have unless you have someone to whom you must be loyal and someone with whom you must share? I don't think it's possible unless you have others to whom loyalty must be shown and with whom you share. And then you must have something as well as someone to which you must be loyal. Whether it's the employer or whoever it might be, you must have something to which you must be loyal. Loyalty belongs to the foundation of the structure if you're going to reach success according to my particular definition. The other cornerstone is cooperation, small world in which we live. Modern science and technology, of course, makes it smaller and smaller all the time, and it will continue to happen. We see things now that are happening on the other side of the world as they're happening. We see someone land on the moon, I think. the amazing things that have been done in outer space and whatnot through modern science and technology, the rapid means of transportation that get us from one spot to another. Oh, we need others so much. Is there anything that you consider to be essential in your personal life or in your professional life for which others are not responsible? Could it be the food you eat, or the clothes you wear, or the means of transportation that get you from one spot to another, or the homes in which you live, or buildings where you conduct your profession, schools such as this, others involved. And if we're cooperative, we will receive cooperation. So those are the blocks that make up the foundation of the structure. The second tier, I have 4 blocks. One is self-control, the second is alertness, the third is initiative, and the fourth is intentness. You must maintain self-control to function near your level of competency. If you lose your self-control, you can't perform physical acts or make mental decisions that are what you're capable of doing, because emotion is taking over, and when emotion takes over, as a general rule, reason slips away. So you must keep them under control. Physically, for example, I suspect among this group here we have many that play golf, or at least think you do, or try to. But I dare say that on the golf course, if you lose your self-control, I know where you're going to be after each drive most of the time. It won't be where you want to be. It'll be off on the side somewhere where you'll be searching for your ball in all probability. Of course, I'm not going to do most of you anyway, but if you've lost your self-control, I know it's going to be there. You must maintain self-control in performing any physical act. Suppose there's disciplining your children at home, and our children cry out for discipline. Yet as long as there's discipline, and if you remember why you discipline, not to punish, but to help, to prevent, to correct, to improve. And if you do it with that in mind, I think you'll have a great chance of getting desirable, positive results. If you antagonize, it's going to be far more difficult to get productive, desirable results. I don't think you can antagonize and positively influence very well at the same time. So we must keep our emotions under control, whether it be performing a physical act or making a mental decision. Alertness is the second topic in the second block in the second tier, alertness. There's something going on around about you all the time from which we can all learn. But too often we don't see it because we get lost in our own narrow tunnel vision. We're all selfish to a degree. It's natural. We all have egos. But we can get so much so that we don't see the wonderful things all around about us all the time. And we must see. We must be alert and alive. Something can help us around us all the time. My favorite American is Abraham Lincoln. This great and gentle human being had the unique and wonderful ability to say so much in just a few words. I think his immortal Gettysburg Address of some 268 words is far more meaningful than many volumes. But his simple statements, such as, there's nothing stronger than gentleness. Most anyone could stand adversity, but to test a person's character, give them power. He said, the worst thing you can do for those you love are the things they could and should do for themselves. He said when being criticized by some Northerners near the end of the terrible war between the states, that he was supposed to destroy his enemies, not make friends of them. And he said, am I not destroying an enemy when I make a friend of them? Yes, he had a wonderful ability to say much in just a few words. You must be alert. He said, I never met a person from whom I did not learn something. Although most of the time it was something not to do. Well, that's being alert. You can learn what to do and what not to do. Oftentimes, if you're just alert. If you're not, you're going to miss out. The next block is initiative. Act. Act when action is needed. Don't be afraid. Never wanted a player to take a shot if he thought he was going to miss. Of course, I had some that I thought was going to miss, but I wish they had the shot. You must have initiative. You must not be afraid to act. The greatest failure of all is failing to act when action is needed. You must act with self-control. You must have reason. You must act according to the information that you've acquired, your experience in the past in regard to the particular situation that requires action, but act. Don't be afraid to fail, because you are not perfect, and you are going to fail at times. But don't let continued failure the same way. Don't be a failure the same way all the time. Learn from the failures and mistakes that you might make, and don't repeat them over and over. The last block in the second tier is intentness. That's determination. That's persistence. That's perseverance. You have to set goals. You have to really persevere, persist to reach the goals. I think the goals should be realistic. I think there's a tendency on occasions to make goals so idealistic that they're unattainable, and sooner or later those become self-evident, and when they do, they'll become counterproductive. So the goals should be difficult to achieve, because things easily acquired or achieved aren't very meaningful and don't amount to much. They should be difficult, but within the realm of possibility, you don't let obstacles and adversity deter you from a continuation of your course. It may make you change it. It may make you back up and look over and start over. It may make you go around or under, but you don't quit. You're persistent and determined. You get stronger through adversity. When I look back, it seems to me all the grief that had to be left me when the pain was over, stronger than I was before. We get stronger physically through adversity, through weights. We get stronger mentally through adversity, through increasingly difficult problems, whether it be in mathematics, such as arithmetic, to algebra, to geometry, and so on. We need adversity to make us stronger. Rather than fear it, we should welcome it, know that it's going to make us a stronger and better person, whether it be physical, mental, or spiritual. We get stronger through adversity. So those are the 4 blocks in the second tier. Now we move up to 3 blocks. We keep moving up, 1 less block, of course. And I've had many people say those just pertain to athletics, and I say you're wrong. They certainly do pertain to athletics, but they pertain to other things as well. Condition is 1, skill is the 2nd, and team spirit is the 3rd, which is nothing more than consideration for others. And we certainly need that, not just in athletics. We need it outside of athletics even more than we need it in athletics. But you have to be conditioned for what you're doing, and it isn't just physical condition. You cannot attain and maintain desirable physical condition unless you're mentally and morally conditioned, and that's something that's within your power, if you so desire to have it. It is within your power. You mustn't blame others. You can do it if you have the discipline, the willpower, and really want to do it. There's different kinds of conditioning. Linebackers are not conditioned the same way that offensive linemen are. They're not conditioned the same as wide receivers are. Doctors are not conditioned the same as attorneys are. Attorneys are not conditioned the same as nurses are. There's different type of conditioning for almost everything. You must be conditioned for what you're doing. Whatever that might be conditioned for. The center block is skill. You have to have a knowledge of and the ability to not only properly, but quickly execute. If you can't execute quickly, you may not get to execute at all. I think I perhaps said a little earlier that I've had some players that were great shooters. My goodness, they could really shoot. But they weren't quick and couldn't get any shots. It doesn't help you much. And then I had others who could get all sorts of shots. They were really quick, couldn't shoot. But they could get them, and that didn't help us either. So you have to be able not only to do things properly, but quickly. Whether you're a surgeon, faced with an emergency, you can't react quickly, you may lose the patient. An attorney may lose the case. You lose your life. Many things can happen unless you can react quickly. So it isn't enough to know how. It isn't enough to know how to execute it properly, but you must also be able to execute it quickly. There's no substitute for knowing your stuff and being able to execute it not only promptly but quickly. The 3rd block is team spirit, which is nothing more than consideration for others. I once heard it defined as a willingness to lose oneself in the group for the good of the group. And I used that for a while, but after such and such a time, I wasn't happy with it. It was missing something, and I couldn't determine exactly what it was until eventually I decided it was just one word, and it was the word willingness. If you're willing to do something you don't want to, probably, you're doing it because somebody asked you to, or it's the thing to do, and you can't do your best at anything if you're just willing to do it. So I changed The definition substituted the word eagerness for willingness. Team spirit is an eagerness to lose oneself in the group for the good of the group. Then you have what we're looking for. We must have team spirit. I'm convinced that in this troubled world of ours today, if heads of state, people in such positions, had more consideration for others, our problems would not be as severe. I'm not naive enough to say that we'd have no problems. Of course we'd have problems, always have problems. But problems would be much less severe if we were more considerate of others. I think it's a terrible, terrible thing that in the history of our civilization, many wars have been fought, millions of lives have been lost, purely and simply because heads of state differed with others in regard to religion or race. And that's true. And if you and I individually don't try to do something each and every day of our lives to alleviate unjust prejudices, then we remain a part of the problem. Yes, we must have consideration for others if we ever hope to come close to the potential that lies within us. I'd like to share something with you that occurred to me. That was helpful to me in the mid-60s when we were having the problems in regard to the Vietnam situation. And I found myself extremely critical of young men who were running off to Canada or the Scandinavian countries or somewhere to avoid the draft. I wouldn't want my loved ones to run away. I would hope they wouldn't have to go. Not just that war or any war, but I wouldn't want them to run away. But I found myself extremely critical of those who were running away, and that could have become cancerous within me, as envy becomes, as greed becomes, as jealousy becomes. It hurts you, it doesn't hurt others, it hurts you. And perhaps this was happening to me without my realization in regard to my feeling toward others who were doing this. And I was flying across country and picked up a magazine on a plane and picked up something that I had never seen before, written again by a sports writer who wrote many things in verse, which I like. My master's thesis was on poetry. I dabble in it, enjoy it. And he wrote something that I hadn't seen, Gentleman Rice, something called Two Sides of War. He had been in the infantry in World War I. He'd been at the front in France and observed the horrors of war at the very front. And there was tremendous shelling back and forth from the Allied lines and the German lines, and after one terrible shelling battle where many were killed and maimed, he sat down behind the lines when there's a lull and wrote something that he called Two Sides of War. And he said all wars are planned by older men. In council rooms apart, they call for greater armament and map the battle charge. But out upon the shattered fields where golden hopes are gray, how very young the faces are where all the dead men lay. Portly and solemn in their pride, the elders cast their vote for this or that or something else that sounds the warlike note. But where their sightless eyes stare out, and gone are all their joys, I've noticed nearly all the dead were hardly more than boys. The average age of our fatalities in the teens. Older people, of course, sending to their deaths. That didn't make me change my feeling about not wanting my own loved ones to run away, but it did make me less critical of those who might be. I got help. I got help when it was needed without my realizing it in a strange way. I'm glad I made that trip. Very glad. Just above those 3 blocks, 2 blocks, one is poise and one is confidence. Poise is much like self-control, and confidence is much like initiative, because it could be left out and replaced. There are many things that could replace it, but I've chosen not to. They're similar but not identical. I also coined my own definition for poise. You already got the idea on it to do that. It's a very simple thing. Poise is just being yourself. It's just yourself. When you have poise, you're not acting. You're not pretending. You're not trying to be something you're not. You are yourself. And you will function near your own ability level, whatever that might be. And you must have confidence that you can do that. And it's possible to have poise and confidence, I believe. Difficult, of course it's difficult. Good things are. It should be. How then can you acquire poise and confidence? It's real. It's not whistling in the dark. by being industrious, by being enthusiastic, by being friendly, and loyal, and cooperative, by maintaining your self-control, by being alert and alive and observing the things that are going on around about you, not getting lost in your own narrow tunnel vision and selfish ways, by having initiative and never fearing failure, but learning from failures of sense or when things didn't turn out the way we want, learning from them, and not making the same ones over and over, and being intent and determined and being persistent and to persevere against all sorts of problems. Be conditioned for whatever you're doing. You have the skills to work, to acquire, and be able to execute, not only properly but quickly, and being imbued with consideration for others, poise and confidence. It'll be real, it won't be false. The last block is competitive greatness, loving it when it's difficult. That's fun. That's truly fun, to being involved in a difficult situation. There's no great fun or enjoyment, in my opinion, to be derived from doing something that anybody else could do. And yet most of the things that each and every one of us have to do every day are simple tasks that most everyone could do. And whatever we're doing, we should try to do it to the best of our ability, but you won't get the pleasure and joy out of the simple tasks that you'll get out of being just involved in the more difficult. I got far greater pleasure out of championships that we won when Al Cinder wasn't playing for me than I did when he was. I expected to win with him, although I know sometimes it's more difficult to do the expected than it is the unexpected. It still isn't going to give you the same pleasure or satisfaction that you get out of doing the unexpected. The competitor, the real competitor, likes that. Grandin Rice wrote Great Competitor, and he said, beyond the winning and the goal, beyond the glory and the fame, he feels the flame within his soul, born of the spirit of the game. And where the barriers may wait built up by the opposing gods, he finds a thrill in bucking fate and riding down the endless odds. Where others wither in the fire or fall below some raw mishap, where others lag behind or tire and break beneath the handicap, he finds a new and deeper thrill to take him on the uphill spin, because the test is greater still and something he can revel. The great competitor revels in it when it's going to be a difficult challenge. That's fun. That's real fun. It's fun in '64 when the Dick Vitales and the Al McGuires and the Billy Packers had us rated as the 77th best team in the nation, and we went through undefeated and won the championship. That's fun. Those are the things that give you pleasure and so on. From the last block, competitive greatness, leading up to the apex, one side you'll notice faith, on the other side, patience. We must have patience. Good things take time. And we must have faith that things are going to work out as they should. I didn't say the way we'd want them to, because things shouldn't always work out the way you want them to. Sometimes that uphill is just better, you know. Nothing wrong with that. But there is something wrong when you don't make the effort to be the best that you can be. Those are the things that I came up with in the pyramid. A Major League Baseball umpire some years ago by the name of George Moriarty made this sort of a little takeoff of this. Moriarty was kind of odd too. He was a Major League Baseball umpire, and yet he spelled Moriarty with only one I. And you'd be very surprised at how many Major League Baseball players noted that fact. Even so, they felt that he had more in his name at times than he had in his head. He wrote something called The Road Ahead or The Road Behind, and said, sometimes I think the fates must grin, as we denounce them and insist the only reason we can't win is the fates themselves have missed. Yet there lives on the ancient flame, we win or lose within ourselves. The shining trophies on our shelves can never win tomorrow's game. Yet you and I know deeper down, there's always a chance to win the crown. But when we fail to give our best, we simply haven't met the test of giving all and saving none until the game is really won. Of showing what is meant by grit, of fighting on when others quit, of playing through, not letting up. It's bearing down that wins the cup. Of dreaming there's a goal ahead, of hoping when our dreams are dead, of praying when our hopes have fled. Yet losing, not afraid to fall, if gamely we have given all, for who can ask more of a man than giving all within his span. Giving all, it seems to me, is not so far from victory. And so the fates are seldom wrong, no matter how they twist and wind. It's you and I who make our fates. We open up or close the gates on the road ahead and the road behind. So true. As long as we don't blame others, we accept our responsibilities. As long as we make the effort to do the best that we can do under the conditions that exist for us and attempt to improve those conditions in honorable ways, there's no such thing as failure. I will close my remarks to you now. I suspect you're wondering why I went this long. Another poem, part of another poem. I'll just give you a part of this. That has been meaningful to me, very meaningful to me. And I used it at various times, certain parts from players under my supervision, as I did many. But this one is called God's Hall of Fame. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. There's one part that says, this crowd on earth, they soon forget the heroes of the past. They cheer like mad until you fall, and that's how long you last. And that's so true in athletics. It's so true. They cheer you mad when you're doing well, but they're looking for somebody else when you don't do so well. That's human nature. We shouldn't complain. But God, he never does forget. And in his Hall of Fame, by just believing in his Son, inscribed, you will find your name. I tell you, friends, I would not trade my name, however small, inscribed up there beyond the stars in that celestial hall, for any famous name on earth or glory that they share. I'd rather be an unknown here than have my name up there. I think we all would. And thank you for listening to remarks. Thank you for coming to the camp. Wish you a safe journey home. Be with your loved ones again, and hope to see you all again. Probably not at a basketball camp. But I'd like to see you all again.